The fastest way to lose the public's trust is to forget that every stranger deserves the same respect. The late afternoon sun stretched across State Highway 16 as travelers pulled into a quiet gas station for fuel, coffee, and a brief pause before continuing home. Pickup trucks rumbled past weathered pumps, children laughed beside family SUVs, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted through the open doors of the convenience store. Nothing about the peaceful scene hinted that within minutes it would become the focus of headlines across the state. A dark blue SUV rolled slowly beside pump number 4, and a woman in blue jeans, a navy polo shirt, white sneakers, and a faded baseball cap stepped out with calm confidence. She looked like any other driver crossing the state alone, carrying no visible signs of importance. No official escort followed her, no flashing lights announced her arrival, and no one gave her a second glance. Her name was Evelyn Carter. Although she served as the state's governor, she often insisted on traveling without a motorcade whenever security advisors approved it. She believed public service meant understanding everyday life from the same perspective as every other citizen. Filling her own gas tank, standing in the same checkout lines, and speaking with ordinary people reminded her why she first chose a life of service. As fuel flowed into the tank, she watched the traffic move steadily along the highway and quietly appreciated a rare moment of normal life. Inside the store, a cashier greeted customers with a friendly smile, while a truck driver filled a travel mug with fresh coffee. A father helped his daughter choose a snack for the road, and an elderly couple compared directions on a folded highway map. It was an ordinary American afternoon, comfortable, familiar, and peaceful. Then a marked patrol cruiser turned into the parking lot. Officer Daniel Brooks slowly drove past the pumps before stopping several spaces away. After more than a decade in law enforcement, he trusted his instincts without hesitation. From inside the cruiser, his attention settled on the woman standing beside the SUV. Something about the situation made him decide to take a closer look. He stepped out, adjusted his uniform, and walked toward pump number 4 with measured confidence. Nearby conversations gradually faded as customers noticed the approaching officer. Evelyn looked up, offered a polite smile, and greeted him with a calm, "Good afternoon, officer." Brooks stopped a few feet away and carefully studied both the vehicle and its driver before speaking in a firm, professional voice. "Ma'am, I'd like you to step away from the vehicle for a moment." Evelyn calmly placed the fuel nozzle back into its holder and nodded without argument. "Of course," she replied evenly. "May I ask what this concerns?" Brooks didn't answer immediately. Instead, he continued observing the SUV as though searching for a detail no one else had noticed. Around them, engines idled, shopping bags rustled, and curious eyes slowly turned toward the quiet encounter. No one realized they were witnessing the beginning of a misunderstanding that would soon test not only one officer's judgment, but the principles of fairness, professionalism, and respect that every badge is meant to represent. Officer Daniel Brooks remained silent for several long seconds, allowing the weight of the moment to grow heavier than his words. His eyes moved carefully across the dark blue sport utility vehicle, lingering on the license plate, the inspection sticker, and the neatly organized interior visible through the windows. Everything appeared ordinary, yet something continued telling him that he should not simply walk away. Experience had taught him that unusual situations often looked completely normal at first glance, and he had learned to trust that instinct. Evelyn Carter noticed the prolonged silence, but showed no frustration. She simply folded her hands in front of her and waited patiently, meeting the officer's gaze with the quiet confidence of someone who understood that remaining calm often revealed more than raising one's voice ever could. Around them, the atmosphere at the gas station slowly shifted. The truck driver who had been filling his travel mug with coffee stepped outside and leaned casually against the wall. The father who had been helping his daughter choose a snack returned to his pickup truck but delayed leaving, curious about what seemed to be an unusually serious conversation. Even the cashier looked through the front window more than once before returning to the register. Nobody knew what had triggered the encounter, but everyone could sense that something unexpected was unfolding. Brooks finally spoke. "Is this vehicle registered to you?" Evelyn answered without hesitation. "Yes, officer. It is legally registered and fully insured." Her voice remained steady and respectful. Brooks nodded slightly, but continued. May I see your driver's license and registration, please? Certainly, Evelyn replied. They are inside my wallet, which is in my handbag on the front passenger's seat. Brooks raised one hand before she moved. Please wait. I would prefer to retrieve it myself. Evelyn acknowledged the request with a small nod. Whatever makes you comfortable, officer. The calmness in her response caught him slightly off guard. Most drivers became nervous, defensive, or impatient when questioned. She did none of those things. Instead, she seemed entirely confident that the situation would eventually resolve itself. Brooks carefully opened the passenger door and located the handbag exactly where she had described. Inside, everything appeared remarkably organized. A notebook, reading glasses, a leather wallet, a folded highway map with handwritten notes marking several small towns. Nothing suggested urgency or concern. As he reached for the wallet, a smartphone resting beside it illuminated the interior of the vehicle. The screen displayed an incoming call. The caller identification read, Office of the State Police Commander. Brooks glanced at the display for only a brief moment before the ringing stopped. He considered the possibility that many people might know someone working in state government. The call alone proved nothing. He closed the wallet after confirming the driver's license matched the woman standing beside the vehicle. Evelyn Carter. The name seemed familiar, but he could not immediately place it. Before he could continue asking questions, the phone rang again. The same caller. Identification appeared across the screen. This time the vibration echoed softly through the quiet cabin. Brooks looked toward Evelyn. She remained standing exactly where he had asked her to stay, showing no sign of impatience. Would you like to answer it? He asked. Evelyn offered a polite smile. That decision is entirely yours, officer. Her answer was unusual. Most people would have eagerly reached for the phone. Instead, she left the choice in his hands. Brooks allowed the call to end without answering. As the screen went dark once more, another sound quietly entered the parking lot. From somewhere beyond the gas station, several engines approached with steady precision. At first, no one paid much attention. Then the cashier looked toward the highway, narrowed his eyes, and whispered almost to himself, "That is a lot of black sport utility vehicles coming this way." One by one, customers slowly turned their heads toward the entrance of the station, unaware that the next few minutes would completely change their understanding of the quiet woman standing beside pump number 4. The quiet ringing of the phone faded once again, leaving behind a silence that somehow felt louder than before. Officer Daniel Brooks slipped the driver's license back into the leather wallet, studying the name one more time as though it should have meant something to him. Evelyn Carter. He searched his memory, but found nothing that immediately explained why the name sounded familiar. Years of routine traffic stops had taught him that confidence could sometimes hide deception, and he was determined not to rush to conclusions in either direction. "Would you mind waiting here just a little longer while I verify a few things?" he asked. Evelyn answered with the same calm expression she had worn since the conversation began. "Take all the time you need, officer. Accuracy is always worth a few extra minutes." Her response carried no frustration, only quiet patience. That answer lingered in Brooks's mind longer than he expected. Most people became anxious when delayed. Some argued. Others demanded explanations. Evelyn simply waited. The customers around the station continued watching from a respectful distance. The truck driver folded his newspaper without reading another word. The father quietly lifted his daughter into the passenger seat of his pickup truck but left the engine off. Even the cashier stopped pretending to organize the shelves and remained near the front window. Curiosity had replaced routine. Brooks stepped back toward his patrol cruiser and spoke briefly into his radio, requesting additional verification on the vehicle registration. Within seconds, the dispatcher confirmed that the registration, insurance, and driver's license all appeared completely valid. Nothing in the system indicated the vehicle had been reported stolen or connected to any criminal investigation. Brooks thanked the dispatcher, yet something continued bothering him. He returned to the SUV and looked once more at the phone resting inside the open handbag. Almost on cue, it illuminated for the third time. The screen displayed the same message, Office of the State Police Commander. Before Brooks could decide whether to mention it, another notification appeared beneath the missed call. It read simply, Security Team requesting immediate update. Brooks frowned slightly. He had encountered government employees before, but very few carried contact information that looked like this. He glanced toward Evelyn again. She remained exactly where he had asked her to stand, her attention fixed not on the officer, but on the people around the station. She noticed a young boy struggling to reach the windshield cleaning bucket beside another pump and quietly smiled as his father helped him. The ordinary scene seemed to matter more to her than the growing tension surrounding her own situation. Then a distant convoy became clearly visible on the highway. 4 black sport utility vehicles traveled together with remarkable discipline, maintaining identical spacing as they approached the station entrance. None displayed flashing emergency lights. None used sirens. Yet their coordinated movement immediately drew every eye in the parking lot. The truck driver lowered his coffee cup. The cashier stepped outside. Several customers instinctively reached for their phones. Brooks followed. Their gaze and felt an unexpected knot form in his stomach. The lead vehicle slowed before turning smoothly into the station, followed by the others in perfect sequence. Every door remained closed for a brief moment after the engine stopped, as though everyone inside had rehearsed the next few seconds countless times before. Evelyn finally looked toward the arriving vehicles. For the first time since the encounter began, a faint smile crossed her face. It was not the smile of someone celebrating being proven right. It was the quiet relief of someone who knew confusion was finally about to give way to clarity. The first door of the lead sport utility vehicle opened with deliberate precision, and every conversation across the gas station came to an immediate stop. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. 4 professionally dressed men and women stepped out one after another, each carrying themselves with the quiet discipline of people accustomed to responsibility rather than attention. There were no raised voices, no hurried movements, and no dramatic display of authority. Their calm presence alone changed the atmosphere. Officer Daniel Brooks instinctively straightened his posture as he watched them approach. He had seen executive protection teams before during major public events, but never this close and never without advance notice. The man leading the group appeared to be in his late 50s, wearing a dark gray suit, polished black shoes, and a simple silver badge clipped inside his jacket. His expression remained composed as his eyes moved across the parking lot before finally settling on Evelyn Carter. The moment he recognized her, his pace slowed slightly. A respectful smile crossed his face. "Governor Carter," he said warmly, "we have been trying to reach you for several minutes." Every customer standing nearby looked from the man in the suit back toward the woman beside pump number 4. The words seemed almost impossible to process. Governor. The title spread silently through the crowd before anyone dared whisper it aloud. Brooks felt the weight of the moment immediately. His eyes shifted toward the driver's license still resting in his hand. Evelyn Carter. The familiar name suddenly connected with countless newspaper headlines, televised press conferences, and community meetings he had seen over the past several years. He understood at once why the name had sounded familiar, yet he had never expected to encounter the governor alone at a neighborhood gas station dressed like an ordinary traveler. Evelyn offered the arriving official the same calm smile she had shown everyone else that afternoon. "I apologize for the delay," she said. Officer Brooks was simply verifying information and making sure everything was in order. There was no accusation in her voice. No embarrassment. No attempt to make the situation appear larger than it already felt. Her response surprised not only Brooks, but everyone listening. The senior official turned toward Brooks and extended his hand. "I am James Whitmore, Commander of the State Police. Thank you for taking your responsibilities seriously." Brooks accepted the handshake, still trying to understand everything unfolding around him. "Sir, I was not aware." He began quietly. Whitmore nodded before Brooks finished speaking. "That is understandable. Governor Carter intentionally travels without a visible escort from time to time because she believes public service begins by remaining connected to everyday citizens." Several customers exchanged astonished glances. The truck driver slowly removed his cap. The cashier quietly lowered his phone. Even the young girl sitting inside the pickup truck leaned forward, trying to understand why everyone had suddenly become so still. Brooks carefully returned Evelyn's wallet and driver's license with both hands. "Governor Carter," he said sincerely, "thank you for your patience throughout this encounter." Evelyn accepted the wallet with a gentle smile. "Professionalism is not measured by whether mistakes happen," she replied. "It is measured by how people respond when they discover the truth." Her words settled over the parking lot with remarkable calm. No one applauded. No one celebrated. Yet every person standing there understood they had just witnessed something far more meaningful than an ordinary roadside encounter. They had watched respect, humility, and accountability begin replacing uncertainty, and the afternoon that had started like any other was quietly becoming a lesson that none of them would soon forget. As the quiet tension gradually faded, the atmosphere at the gas station began to feel different. Customers who had remained silent only moments earlier slowly returned to their conversations, but their voices carried a new sense of curiosity. They had expected an argument, perhaps even a confrontation. Instead, they had witnessed patience, professionalism, and humility from every person involved. Governor Evelyn Carter thanked Commander James Whitmore for coming, but quietly reminded him that there was no emergency. "I appreciate your concern," she said with a warm smile. "But there are people across this state dealing with problems far more important than my delayed schedule." Whitmore nodded respectfully. "We understand, Governor. However, when we were unable to reach you and your security team reported an unexpected delay, protocol required us to verify that everything was all right." Evelyn acknowledged his explanation with a slight nod before turning back toward Officer Daniel Brooks. The young officer still appeared unsettled, replaying every decision he had made since pulling into the station. He realized that every question he had asked had been based on procedure, yet he also understood that assumptions, even well-intentioned ones, could easily influence the way those procedures were carried out. Before Brooks could apologize again, Evelyn spoke first. "Officer, may I ask you a question?" Brooks immediately answered, "Yes, Governor." She looked around the station before speaking. "When you first walked toward me, what was the first thing you noticed?" Brooks hesitated. He wanted to give the correct answer, but he knew she was asking for the honest one. After several quiet seconds, he admitted, "I believed something about the situation seemed unusual, but I could not explain exactly why." Evelyn smiled gently. "That answer is more valuable than you realize." Several people standing nearby continued listening without saying a word. Even the truck driver remained beside his pickup truck, coffee forgotten in his hand. "Every public servant develops instincts," Evelyn continued. "Experience teaches us to notice details. The challenge is remembering that instincts should begin an investigation, not end it. Facts must always come before conclusions." Brooks slowly nodded. Those words struck him more deeply than any formal training seminar ever had. Commander Whitmore folded his arms and looked toward the small crowd. "That lesson applies to every one of us," he added. "Whether someone wears a uniform, carries a badge, or holds elected office, accountability begins with listening before deciding." The father who had been watching with his young daughter quietly smiled. "That is something every profession could probably learn," he said, earning a few quiet laughs that finally eased the remaining tension. Evelyn looked toward the little girl sitting inside the pickup truck. The child smiled shyly and waved. Evelyn waved back before walking toward the fuel pump. "I believe I still owe this vehicle about 12 gallons of gasoline," she said with a lighthearted smile. The simple remark brought genuine laughter across the station, transforming an unforgettable afternoon into something unexpectedly human. Brooks stepped forward. "Governor, please allow me to finish helping you." Evelyn shook her head politely. "Thank you, officer, but today has already provided enough reminders that every person should be allowed to complete ordinary moments without unnecessary interruption." Brooks smiled for the first time that afternoon. As he watched Evelyn resume pumping gas with the same calm confidence she had shown from the beginning, he realized the greatest lesson of his career had not come inside a classroom or during a formal briefing. It had arrived quietly beside pump number 4, where respect, patience, and the willingness to seek the truth had proven far more powerful than assumptions ever could be. Governor Evelyn Carter finished fueling her sport utility vehicle and carefully returned the nozzle to its holder as the last traces of tension disappeared from the station. The late afternoon breeze carried the scent of fresh rain from distant fields, and for the first time in nearly half an hour, the familiar sounds of ordinary life returned. Car doors closed. Engine started. Someone laughed quietly near the convenience store. Yet Officer Daniel Brooks remained standing exactly where he was, watching the governor with thoughtful eyes. Something inside him had changed. He realized the encounter had become more than a routine stop. It had become an unexpected lesson that no classroom could have provided. Commander James Whitmore noticed the young officer's expression and stepped beside him. "Daniel," he said calmly, "there is a difference between confidence and certainty. Good officers learn that difference every single day." Brooks nodded without taking his eyes off the governor. "I understand that now, sir." Whitmore smiled slightly. "Understanding is only the first step. The important part is what you choose to do with that understanding tomorrow." Those words settled heavily in Brooks's mind. Throughout his career, he had believed experience naturally produced better judgment. Now he recognized that experience only mattered when it remained connected to humility. Across the parking lot, Evelyn thanked several customers who had patiently waited while the unexpected delay unfolded. The truck driver wished her a safe trip. The father introduced his young daughter, who proudly shook the governor's hand with both of hers. Evelyn asked the little girl whether she enjoyed school. "I love history," the child answered with a bright smile. "Then keep asking questions," Evelyn replied warmly. History changes because people are willing to learn something new. The simple conversation lasted less than a minute, yet everyone nearby listened as though each sentence carried a lesson worth remembering. Brooks quietly approached. "Governor Carter," he began, "may I ask one final question before you leave?" Evelyn turned toward him with the same patient expression she had shown since the beginning. "Of course." Brooks hesitated for a moment before speaking honestly. "After everything that happened today, were you ever upset with me?" Evelyn reflected briefly before answering. "I was concerned about the situation, but I never believed the conversation had to become a conflict. Public service places responsibility on all of us. Some days that responsibility belongs to elected officials. Other days it belongs to law enforcement officers. Every day it belongs to ordinary citizens who choose respect instead of anger." Brooks lowered his eyes for a moment, absorbing every word. He realized that she had never tried to win the encounter. Instead, she had tried to improve it. Commander Whitmore checked his watch and reminded the governor that another community meeting would begin within the hour. Evelyn thanked him before turning back toward Brooks one last time. "The next person you meet will probably never become governor," she said with a gentle smile. "Treat them with the same patience anyway. That is how trust grows." Brooks returned the smile and gave a respectful nod. As the governor entered her vehicle and prepared to continue her journey, the customers slowly returned to their routines. Within minutes, the parking lot looked ordinary once again, but every person who had witnessed the afternoon carried away something that could not be measured by rank, title, or authority. They left with the quiet reminder that fairness begins long before anyone learns who another person really is. The governor's sport utility vehicle disappeared beyond the intersection, blending into the steady flow of afternoon traffic until it became just another vehicle traveling the open highway. For several moments, no one at the gas station spoke. It was as though the entire parking lot needed time to absorb everything that had happened. Eventually, engines started one by one, customers returned to their routines, and life resumed its familiar pace. Yet for Officer Daniel Brooks, nothing felt familiar anymore. He remained beside his patrol cruiser long after everyone else had begun leaving, replaying every decision in his mind with remarkable clarity. Commander James Whitmore quietly approached before the remaining members of the security detail prepared to depart. "You are thinking about every minute of today," he observed. Brooks gave a small nod. "Yes, sir. I keep asking myself what I could have done differently." Whitmore rested one hand lightly against the roof of the patrol vehicle. "That question matters far more than pretending you never made a mistake. The strongest professionals are not the ones who never face difficult moments. They are the ones who allow those moments to improve their judgment." Brooks listened carefully. Throughout his career, he had measured success by the number of correct decisions he made. For the first time, he understood that real growth often began with the willingness to examine the decisions that could have been better. Before leaving, Whitmore handed Brooks a simple business card. "Next month we are holding a statewide leadership workshop for supervisors and field officers," he explained. "I believe your perspective would contribute something valuable." Brooks looked surprised. "After today?" Whitmore smiled. "Especially after today. Experience becomes wisdom only when someone chooses to learn from it." The convoy slowly pulled away, leaving Brooks standing alone beneath the fading afternoon sky. Back inside the convenience store, The cashier was wiping down the front counter when the truck driver walked in carrying 2 cups of fresh coffee. He placed one on the counter and smiled. "Looks like everybody learned something today." The cashier laughed quietly. "Including us." They spoke for several minutes about how quickly first impressions could shape expectations and how easily patience could disappear when people assumed they already understood a situation. Outside, Brooks completed the final notes from the encounter before closing the report on his computer. His description was clear, factual, and honest. He documented the sequence of events exactly as they had occurred, including the verification process, the arrival of the governor's security team, and the conversation that followed. There was no attempt to protect his pride or minimize the lessons he had learned. Accuracy, he now realized, was not simply a professional obligation. It was a reflection of personal integrity. As he finished typing, one final sentence from Governor Carter echoed in his mind. "Facts must always come before conclusions." He quietly repeated those words to himself before closing the laptop. The sun slipped lower behind the trees, painting the western sky with shades of gold and amber. Brooks climbed into his patrol cruiser, started the engine, and returned to the highway with a renewed understanding of the responsibility he carried every time he placed on the uniform. Somewhere miles ahead, Governor Carter was already on her way to another community meeting, probably unaware that one ordinary stop at a small-town gas station had permanently changed the way one officer viewed his profession. Sometimes the most important victories are not announced in headlines or celebrated in public. Sometimes they happen silently, inside a person's character, where better judgment begins with the simple decision to keep learning. The following Monday morning, the memory of the quiet afternoon at the gas station still lingered in Officer Daniel Brooks's mind as he reported for duty before sunrise. The station looked exactly as it always had. Patrol vehicles lined the parking lot, dispatch radios echoed through the hallways, and officers exchanged greetings while preparing for another day of serving the community. Yet everything felt different to Brooks. He no longer viewed his responsibilities as a checklist of procedures alone. He understood that every decision carried the power to strengthen or weaken public trust. During the morning briefing, Commander James Whitmore addressed supervisors and patrol officers from across the district. Instead of discussing statistics or recent arrests first, he shared a simple observation. "Every encounter is an opportunity to earn confidence," he said. "People may forget the details of an investigation, but they rarely forget how they were treated." The room remained unusually quiet. Brooks listened more carefully than ever before. When the meeting ended, Whitmore asked him to remain for a few minutes. The commander placed a folder on the table containing the completed review of the previous week's incident. Brooks expected criticism or formal discipline. Instead, the report acknowledged that the verification process had followed policy, while also identifying several opportunities for improving communication, explaining procedures more clearly, and reducing unnecessary uncertainty during routine contacts. "This is not about punishment," Whitmore explained. "It is about continuous improvement. Professionalism is built one conversation at a time." Brooks nodded, relieved but also determined. "I will do better," he answered sincerely. "I know you will," Whitmore replied. "Otherwise we would not be having this conversation." Later that afternoon, Brooks responded to a call involving an elderly driver who appeared confused after taking a wrong exit from the interstate. The situation was simple. The driver had become lost while trying to visit his grandchildren for the first time in several years. Instead of rushing through the encounter, Brooks remembered Governor Carter's words about allowing facts to come before conclusions. He patiently listened, helped the man review a printed map, confirmed the correct address, and even suggested a safer route that avoided heavy construction. Before leaving, the elderly gentleman smiled warmly and said, "Thank you for treating me with respect. Growing older can make simple things feel complicated." Those words stayed with Brooks for the rest of the day. He realized meaningful public service was rarely defined by dramatic moments. More often, it was found in ordinary conversations that ended with someone feeling heard rather than hurried. Several weeks later, Brooks attended the statewide leadership workshop that Commander Whitmore had recommended. Officers from every corner of the state shared experiences, discussed difficult decisions, and explored ways to strengthen community relationships through professionalism, transparency, and thoughtful communication. When Brooks was invited to describe a lesson that had changed his perspective, he spoke honestly without mentioning names or titles. He simply described an ordinary afternoon that reminded him the person standing across from a badge should always be treated first as a fellow citizen. The room remained silent until one veteran officer quietly nodded and said, "That lesson takes some people an entire career to learn." Brooks smiled with quiet gratitude. Looking around the room, he understood that the journey toward becoming a better officer did not begin with proving authority. It began with earning trust, one respectful conversation at a time. The seasons changed, but the lesson from that ordinary afternoon never faded. Months later, Officer Daniel Brooks found himself driving the same stretch of State Highway 16 during another routine patrol. The familiar gas station appeared on the horizon exactly as it always had. Families filled their vehicles before weekend trips, truck drivers stretched their legs beside the fuel pumps, and neighbors greeted one another outside the convenience store. To anyone passing by, it was simply another peaceful stop along a busy highway. Brooks slowed his patrol cruiser for a moment, not because he expected anything unusual to happen, but because the place had quietly become a reminder of the officer he wanted to become. He remembered how easily assumptions could influence judgment and how quickly patience could restore trust. Just as he prepared to continue driving, dispatch requested that he assist a young woman whose vehicle had broken down near the entrance. Brooks arrived within minutes and found her standing beside an aging sedan with two small children waiting inside. She appeared worried, apologizing repeatedly for causing inconvenience. Months earlier, Brooks might have focused only on solving the immediate problem as quickly as possible. Instead, he began with a simple question. "Are you and your family safe?" The woman nodded with visible relief. Brooks contacted roadside assistance, helped move the vehicle to a safer location, and remained nearby until help arrived. Before leaving, one of the children smiled through the open window and waved enthusiastically. Brooks smiled and waved back, realizing that the most important part of his job often required nothing more complicated than treating people with patience and dignity. Later that evening, Governor Evelyn Carter attended a community leadership forum only a few miles away. During the question and answer session, a high school student stood and asked what quality mattered most in public service. The audience expected an answer about courage, intelligence, or experience. Instead, Evelyn paused thoughtfully before replying. "The most important quality is remembering that every person you meet has a story you cannot see. If you begin with respect, you give truth the opportunity to reveal itself." The room fell silent as people reflected on her words. Somewhere in the audience, Commander James Whitmore smiled quietly, recognizing the lesson that had connected so many lives through one unexpected afternoon. Weeks later, Brooks received a handwritten note delivered through the department mail. There was no official seal, no formal announcement, and no public recognition. The message contained only one sentence. "Thank you for choosing to keep learning, because every community is stronger when its public servants grow with it." Brooks never discovered who had written the note, but he carefully folded it and placed it inside the small notebook he carried during every shift. Whenever difficult decisions arose, he would read those words before stepping out of his patrol vehicle. Years passed, promotions came and went, and new officers eventually joined the department. Whenever Brooks was asked to mentor recruits, he never began by discussing authority or procedure. He began by reminding them that every conversation shapes the reputation of the badge they wear. Procedures provide direction, but character determines how those procedures are carried out. Long after names, titles, and positions fade from memory, people remember one simple truth. Respect given freely is never wasted. Fairness never goes out of style. And the strongest form of leadership is found not in the power to command others, but in the wisdom to treat every person with equal dignity before knowing anything about who they are.